Hello and welcome. I am the Restless Kaiser, as you know.
I'm Johnny B, and
I'm Discourse Minis.
Thanks, but together we are
Modeling for Advantage. Every time.
Beautiful sound. So who have we got in the chat tonight? We've got Rich John painting up some Rouge Trader Plastic Imperial Guard.
Oh, love me some Rouge Trader.
Rouge Trader. You've got some of them, haven't you, John? Them really old Imperial Guard models?
I do have the plastic ones. Yes, I have some sitting right here in front of me. Oh, me back. I hurt myself. Anyways.
Nick from Team Tools Game, 2 more days. You'll be 2 years a member. Well, thank you for your continued support.
That dedication.
It's good to see Discourse again. And well done to Clueless, Team Clueless Games. Another exciting adventure with MfA and Discourse. Can't wait to watch the rerun.
Enjoy it live. What do you mean watch the rerun? Come on.
No, he like picks up his kid or something in like 10 minutes after the show starts. And every
no excuse.
Week. But he always comes in before the show to say, I'm going to watch it when I get back.
Okay.
Here's what Riftforge Orcs and Bolt Action Italian Bersaglieri on the painting table tonight. The Kings of what? You know what? I reached out to them and said, "Oh, I've seen you've done these new ambush boxes. Getting a chance we can review some." Not even a reply. Not even an up yours reply.
So really? Mantic Games didn't get back to you.
Mantic Games didn't get back to me. Me and Ronnie are through. And he started building his ECW Warlord starter box. Not looking forward to painting it yet. There is a lot of pike and shot in there. Crypto Kev and Tony Honkner here. Duncan FX, looking forward to another great show. It's always a great show, but especially when we have the consumer protection rights watchdog Discourse Miniatures or Games Workshop hater, depending on your viewpoint.
I'm my very own commission. Allied,
looking forward to hearing about 10th edition, seeing if I'm finally tempted to get back into 40k for about 10 or 11 years. Hold your horses, Allied. Hold your horses. Subs is here. Crypto Care, very cautious optimism. Good luck. Yeah. Are we waiting for Kaiser to put on his trousers?
Yes.
Well, that was part of it. I had to disappear. And Friends of General Haig is here. Well, there you go. So on the painting station tonight, as probably some of you have realized, we've got a kind of thing going on with Flames of War at the moment, which is why we got hold of that pre-release. And we'll have a Flames of War week next week with a lot of content. The week of the release of the new box. So I am painting some Sovietskis tonight. What are you up to, John, paint-wise?
I really, 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 really need to paint these 3 Romans that have been sitting here, so we can play the next SPQR. Yeah, so I'm gonna have a go at getting some paint on those. Miss Disco Horse, do you have the paints on the tables, or are you just gonna do the talk?
I will not be painting anything, but I will be building something. I'm going to be building the masked singer that came from a Happy Meal from McDonald's.
Oh,
so that'll be my hobby project for tonight. Yeah, I always bring a hobby project. That
is a marvelous thing indeed. On the off, are we going to do it? On the off chance that nobody knows who you are, Miss Discourse, can you let the people know who you are and where they can find you on your YouTubes?
Sure. My name is Discourse Minis. I have a YouTube channel, Discourse Minis, and that covers miniature wargaming, including Warhammer and Carnivale and Lunar and all these other types of games as well. I often talk about things that are pertinent to the miniature wargaming industry as well as the hobby as a whole as well. And I also have another channel called Dungeons and Discourse, which is all about TTRPGs and Dungeons and Dragons and role-playing games too, where I do the exact same thing. So if you love my mini wargaming content, you might love that too. So check it out.
Oh, that was
slick,
amazing. That was so slick, unreal. One complaint: can you use less big words? Like, was it pertinent? Yes.
I can try, Johnny. I'll try for you.
Thank
Johnny.
you. I appreciate that. Thank you. Anyway, go on, Kaiser. What's on the agenda? What are we doing?
Well, I thought we would talk about 10th edition. So let's start by what's 9th edition. John, maybe some other guys played maybe 3 or 4 games of 9th edition.
I was so stoked for 9th, man. On the announcement, thinking they're just going to carry on doing what they were doing with 8th, but make it awesome and add all this crusade stuff and this narrative and thematic. Well pumped for that. And then they released it, and it was terrible.
Well, they released it, and then they released it, and then they released it, and they
then
just
they
kept
released
releasing it. Yeah, over and over in this massive cycle. It's kind of funny. Halfway through 9th edition, that's when they started talking about seasons, right? Like it wasn't until midway through 9th that they actually started talking about the season model. They actually switched gears, didn't they? And gave it a name.
There was a season model? Oh, you mean like the whole chapter improved?
Yeah, in 2022, they started talking about seasons. And so it's kind of weird that they did that midway through 9th edition's lifespan. I wonder if they at that stage were like, okay, we're going to do 10th in 2023. So let's just try and eke out as much cash as possible from these rubes before we transition over into a new system entirely. Well,
yeah,
not a fan of 9th.
No, and what went wrong with it for me, certainly, I don't know if it's the same with you, John, was just the feeling that they'd had this opportunity to realize that 8th edition had gone too far, that we had enjoyed the beginning of 8th a lot. A lot of us had got back into the hobby. I hadn't played Warhammer since the 90s. I played 1st edition and nothing in between, and got back into it. I joined the 8th edition hype train, like many others. And at the beginning, with the indexes and stuff, you could kind of keep up with it. So the idea of a kind of hard reset on all of that with 9th edition and fixing some of the weirdness around, I don't know, one Gretchen stopping a tank from firing out, I was like, okay, this is just a cleaner version of what we're already having, where they know they need to change some of the core rules. And okay, there's a big box with a rule book in it, and I'm going to want the models, so fine. But it very quickly became, like you said, with there's Munitorum handbooks and so forth. And I think we'd failed to see, you've said it a few times, John, they described it as a tournament edition. In the pre-launch literature and announcements that were talking about it as it was built for tournament play. Because when we got our hands on those Crusade rules, it's like, fucking hell, this is another game to learn.
Yeah, that's the problem.
You didn't like the Crusade rules, right? You didn't like those kind of...
Because it was more rules. And those more rules introduced more rules to the table.
I'm in two minds about the Crusade system. Actually, I don't know. I still don't know how I feel about it to this day. I think I like it, though. I think I really like the Crusade system. I think it's because it was such a strange step for campaign progression. That was just so much different from what I'd ever really played before. The idea of bounding up the kind of progression into the army itself as opposed to a meta map. I've always thought that the Crusade system was very clever.
Yeah, I think, at least for me, after reading 9th edition rules, I mean, yes, they said it was going to be tournament play, and that was very visible. They were quite open about that in the development, and they released loads of videos, chatting to the guys that helped develop it. Awesome. But they said, it's not just tournament play. We've got Crusade as well. Great, fantastic. But it's still the same core rules, those 9th edition tournament-esque rules. And the whole wording of the rules written completely turned me off.
Yeah.
It was just painful.
100% agreed. I think with 9th edition, and I'm actually kind of worried that this is going to continue on with 10th edition as well. The rules writing is so convoluted that obviously it's falling over itself, trying to protect against these interpretations of the system that are, that it can be a little bit janky or abuse the system in some way. But they end up writing
to
rules
make them clear. This is not working.
They don't need to do that. You get 3 paragraphs to describe a +1 to hit, right? Like, it's just insane. It's way, way, way too much. And what I've seen of the data cards for 10th edition, it's looking like it's going to be similar. Yeah, it's looking like it's going to be similar. Now, I actually don't blame competitive players for this. I think that competitive play gets a really bad rap. I see online there's a lot of discussion about competitive play versus casual play, and there's a lot of hate out there from competitive players. I actually think that competitive play is like a very important element of wargaming, and I think that it has this huge position in the market and inside the hobby. I think that it has a ton of relevancy. It's only competitive play that will get people out into these big tournaments and come out and organize.
You've got competitive players which are skill-based, your chess masters and everything else. These guys are just looking for loopholes in rules and everything like that.
Casual players are too, though. Casual players are looking for loopholes as well. You've never played it. Anyone can be that guy.
So it was
anyone could be that guy.
For me, it was
almost endorsed.
It was the mission format that was the fun killer.
Oh, the bean count, though. Yeah,
the bean count to victory that I have to pick. I've my primary objectives, and I have to pick 2 or 3 secondary objectives and 1 cheese-based objective. And some of them were based upon the fact that I paint my models blue, and some of them were based upon the fact that I've got the word Imperium, and others are based upon the fact that it's Tuesday. And I've somehow to build my army and make careful choices about these, because that's how winning and losing the game is going to be determined. It's not about I can't just dump my Space Marines on the table and play my mate. There's a huge amount of pre-game work that you have to do. And then in the game, these are scored in the command phase. This is scored in the end of the turn. This is scored when someone blows their nose. And I know this because I know I just didn't want to fucking do it. I didn't want to read them. I didn't want to use them. And they were the only missions that were provided. And that was a really key part of the kind of anti-fun of the edition. I don't want to play missions like that.
Ninth edition was tough to get to the table. It was hard to get like people excited about playing it and have to do all the kind of the setup to do it, for sure, in my experience. Now, that said, I mean, if we want to talk about 10th edition, it sounds like they are, they're talking as if they're streamlining that process. Obviously, there is a new stat in 10th edition called OC, which is objective control, which sounds to me like there's still going to be an element of what you're talking about there, Kaiser. There's still going to be, because I think the new detachments, which are the new sub-factions as well, might come with their own sort of secondary objectives as well. It's sounding like that system might still be in place to some extent.
That to me, though, it seems from what we've seen so far is no more than just a better way of doing that objective secured rule that they have for everybody.
Yeah.
So that your vanilla troop units count as twice as many bodies, rather than that unit just being a trump card, which I think most people didn't like.
Well, so on the one hand, I'm actually really excited by a Warhammer unit having a stat that isn't directly related to killing or being killed. I think it's fun for units to be able to do something other than just killing things. I think that's like a kind of a core problem that Warhammer has had for the longest time, which is that most units exist only to perform the function of destroying other things. And you can kind of measure their utility and how well they do that. But having an OC stat, meaning that you'll kind of want to bring stuff, I think that's interesting. Now, that said, I feel like an OC stat is kind of a very clunky way to do this idea that, this unit is an objective controller and this one isn't. The idea of like one unit counts as 2 models when on top of an objective has always said very weird to me. It's always said as kind of a little bit, I don't know, it's just really peculiar. It just feels like a really clunky mechanic. It doesn't feel very elegant at all.
Compared to the trump card of objective control, I think it's more elegant, or it's more simple. But we haven't seen hero data sheets yet, and it's entirely possible that knights have an OC score of 12.
Yeah,
and things like that. So we're looking at it from the perspective of the models that we've seen at the moment.
Yeah.
And I always felt it was ridiculous that things like knights were terrible at controlling objectives if you have to have an army of them.
They're one model, yeah.
and actually, one of the reasons why they've been so bad in 10th edition is because they can't do all of those ways of scoring objectives. If they do, they give up shooting and fighting, and they're quite expensive models.
Yeah.
So yeah, and to just kind of finish on that thing about missions, for me, it was the fact that it was the only way that was offered to play. Whereas in 8th edition, there were people that were playing ITC, there were people that were playing ETC, and there were people like John and I who just played missions out of the book. And we were happy with the missions in the book because they said, stand here at the end of the game to win, or grab that cheese wheel from the center of the board to win. And I could just pick that up and play. And yeah, I'm not one of those players that wants a lot of pre-game. I know some people really like that. I've never been a metagamer as a role player, poring over the rule book, making the right combination of feats and stat choices. I've always intensely disliked
min-max.
Yeah, the kind of the min-max and so forth. So any pre-game work I don't like, and any work during the game to score it, for God's sake. Like, I'm going to win this on score, and that score is based upon me sending messages through the ether with units that did nothing else. I don't like that.
Like, I'm the same way. I'm a variety gamer, which means that I play a lot of different war games, which means I don't have the brain space to really get that heavily invested in a single mechanic. And so therefore I can't, I'm not going to sit and dedicate and learn all these different kind of nuances to this one system. I'm going to be playing a variety of games, and I don't have the time to spend. Like, so I totally agree with you. I totally do agree with you. I understand there's people out there who just want to play Warhammer and that's it. And obviously the business model of the game kind of incentivizes that too. Also, let's be honest, like, that's why Warhammer looks the way that it does. It's designed to try and take up as much brain power as possible. I think that one of the things that people kind of forget about Warhammer a lot of the time is that it is actively designed around ivory tower design. It's meant to be exclusive. It has always been about an elite gamer cadre who can play this war game. If you look at some of the earliest kind of correspondence from Games Workshop, if you look at some of their internal documents from like the 2000s, for example, that was their idea of Warhammer. They wanted it to be something that appealed to like the elite gamers out there. And
lies. Absolute filth and lies. I remember a shining time of goblin green bases and screaming "Wah!" with your friends as loud as you could to have fun.
Yeah, but even then, so I'm thinking more like 4th edition as opposed to the glorious 90s of 2nd, I'm and 3rd. I'm thinking like 4th edition. At that stage, Warhammer was indeed designed to be something that was difficult to get into and difficult to play, but that was kind of meant to be a rewarding experience, and you were meant to build this army and spent a lot of time thinking about it. These days, though, I think that that's not something the audience want. And over the last 10 years, we've seen games have gotten faster, they've gotten simpler, they've gotten easier to play, they've gotten more accessible. And I think those are good changes in the marketplace. I think that things like one-page rules have been really healthy. I think that the prevalence of like Osprey Blue Book games, the rise of skirmish games, these smaller experiences that don't eat up your entire life, I think that's awesome. I think that's really awesome. And it's a lot of people play like a wider variety of games. And I think the 10th edition in some ways is a response to these new changes in the market and what people are interested in. I think that people kind of like are jokingly saying, oh, it's 10th edition, they're stealing from one-page rules. But I think that they have definitely been informed somewhat by one-page rules. Like, I think they understand that people don't want to have to read an entire huge codex in order to learn how to build their army. And so that makes me hopeful for 10th. I do hope that ultimately they've mentioned that you'll only need the 2 pages of your army rules to play. I hope that does end up being the case, that I can have my Imperial Guard army that I've got in my shelf, and I can, look at the online army rules, read the 2 pages, look at a couple of data cards, and be like, okay, I can play a game this Saturday. I would really love that to be the case. So I'm hopeful that it will be.
Okay. Wow. If I share my screen, so there's already share screen. Here we go. So this is a new data card, right?
Oosh.
It's a lot of text, isn't it?
I'll try and zoom that in. Is that? Yeah. Okay.
And that's A2, I've heard. That's an A2 data card size.
That's it.
Then tell them.
Yeah.
What's kind of funny to me is that they've been talking a lot about how they're getting rid of all these stratagems. You know, we've gotten rid of a bunch of stratagems, but they've just put them on the data card.
Literally, teleport Homer.
Yeah, it's like they've just literally taken the text that would have been a stratagem and just put it on the data card, which admittedly is a better place for it to be, but nevertheless, I still think there's quite a lot going on. One of the things about Warhammer is that it's an army game, and it's got a lot of factions, it's got a lot of armies, it's got a lot of units, and that means that it's tougher to get away with these like more complicated units for sure.
And it's got a lot of rules. So in terms of this then, because you mentioned about the data card, I'm already seeing things that are not on the data card.
Like
anybody spot it?
Where's the points, Dave?
The points are not on there. That's one thing. Yep, that's not.
Well, they never show points where it's relevant. It's always really frustrated me. They never have points beside the stats, so you have to go to the back of the codex to find them.
Unit
they had power level before, but we'll talk about power level later, so we don't get distracted. But it's a critical piece of information for you to be able to build your army from these cards that's missing from this data sheet.
Well, there's no unit composition, so
there's no unit composition.
I'll just have a million Terminators.
With assault cannons, right?
Yeah, damn right. Boom.
Right. So, I mean, that's a pretty important thing to be missing.
Not if you're already in the hobby and can assume that Terminators come in units of 5. So yeah. Boom.
Well, I'm going to assume that it's a box amount. It's a box. Yeah. You know, you buy your Terminator squad. And look, there you go. Here's all the weapon options that they have, because you've equipped them all with the only options inside the box.
Yeah, because there's no limit there either. It didn't say up to 1, up to this. So yeah, the unit composition information is missing. Why is that important? Well, I don't think you can play the game without unit composition. And where
as
are
Discourse says, though, perhaps it will be directly linked with the sales. So each data card represents a box. So there you go. That's what you've got.
And that works with the newer models, where they've very much gone down the line of, well, there's one plasma gun in the Death Guard Marine box, so you can only have one blight launcher in a unit. But these kits are older. Well, these ones won't be, will they? These are new.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think you have to buy a new army. So shut up. For the other ones in the bin.
Classic.
So the reason I'm saying that is because if you look at the melee weapons, you'll see that the chain fist, the power fist, and the power weapon have a different number of attacks on the power weapon.
Yeah.
So one can reasonably assume, well, the sergeant has normally got a power sword, right? In that normal Terminator stock build. Is that extra attack because it's a power weapon, or is that extra attack because it's on the sergeant?
No.
Can I have more than one power weapon?
I think you just follow the profile, you know? I think it doesn't matter anymore. It's all bound into the weapons. It's all bound into the weapons.
No sergeants anymore.
Yeah, I don't think that there will be.
Is that true?
Well,
or is there some other set of data that tells you
there is going
to?
We're missing the full picture, because there is going to be a double page spread that will be released for free by Games Workshop that will tell us more stuff. Like, for example, the Oath of Moment is a faction ability for Space Marines that will be detailed in this free PDF that Games Workshop are going to release. So we don't have any information about that. For all we know, there could indeed be unit compositions, but that is detailed out in this additional thing. As far as I can tell, the data cards are just to have all the information that you need at the table, is what I'm assuming.
Yeah,
that's what I'm assuming. But we still, I don't think we know right now.
No. A good point.
But I just can't help but feel that unit composition stuff is exactly going to be in the books that they're going to sell you.
Well,
and a lot of this talk is free at launch, doesn't mean free.
Okay, can we talk about the stuff that's good?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good.
Really,
Whoa. Did you really just say that?
Yeah, it's like, so there's a lot of stuff to look forward to with 10th edition. I think that firstly, moving on from 9th edition is a good thing. I think that reducing the number of stratagems, like they've said that they will do, it's a really good idea. I think that the core rules being free, obviously the core rules have always been free, but I assume when they say that the rules are going to be free for this edition, that they mean that the kind of wider rule system is going to be free, including like missions and stuff like that, at least in the core book. So I think that's really cool. They're obviously moving towards a kind of online space now as well. It's the first system where they're like, we're going to sell you an indice or an index, but that index will be online, right? Like, I don't think they did that for 8th. In 8th, it was still very much focusing on the paper copy, on the hard copy of the rules. So the indices are all going to be online. So that's cool. I like those changes. I really do. The design ethos that they kind of keep talking about, which is simplified, not simple. Okay, sure, I agree. There is a beauty in simplicity for sure. My problem, though, okay, which is probably what you were waiting for, Johnny, is that I'm concerned that they have already confirmed that they will be releasing codices. So all of this, like, it kind of undercuts all of these good things that I'm talking about, right? Like the free rules and the game being more accessible. What's the point in all this if they're just going to start selling the books again, including all these like special rules and detachment rules and more stratagems and, you know, more rules? Like if they're still selling rules, then surely we're just going to go right back to where we are right now. I can't see that we won't.
Yeah.
If you know, like I really am trying to keep an open mind. I'm really trying not to prejudge this, but it does feel a lot like 8th edition, and it does feel a lot like Age of Sigmar as well, which had a very similar type of launch where everything was free at first. And then once they got in the audience who kind of bought into this new ecosystem, then they started, you know, being sold to, essentially. Once they got you on the boat, they started selling you really overpriced coffee, was kind of how it felt like.
And I love overpriced coffee.
Yeah, right?
I does love overpriced coffee.
So that's what I'm sort of worried about at the minute. I do think that Warhammer, generally speaking, does need a bit of a reset button, but it only needs a reset because, well, it got kind of overbloated again. And so if by the end of 10th and we go into 11th and it needs another reset button, like how many times can we give GW a chance with this thing? You know?
Right. Yeah.
There's plenty more new people being made, you see, and they will...
A huge population of new players for 10th. There are so many people excited to get into 10th, for sure. Yeah. For sure. Yeah. People who got in over COVID, who got over the pandemic, you know, people who bought all the minis and kind of didn't really get into 9th edition because 9th edition, let's be honest, didn't have great press. I think that for the casual player base, 9th edition was maybe a lot to expect off a casual player base. 10th edition is being explicitly billed and sold as pretty casual friendly, as being far more accessible. And so I think there's a lot of people who are going to get into 10th edition and they might be getting taken for a bit of a ride. I hope that's not the case. I've got an open mind, cautiously optimistic, but
I loves it. I loves 40k. I want to be able to play it again and be happy and, you know, be all inclusive and
100%. Like I have 40k armies. I really want to play them, you know? And I play one piece rules and things right now, but there is something to be said for playing the Warhammer 40k rule set with a ton of the flavor that it brings, you know, that maybe one piece rules doesn't bring as much of. So I really want to play and enjoy the game. And I am genuinely, I'm going to Warhammer Fest at the end of the month. So I am genuinely looking forward to playing some 10th edition there, which Games Workshop have confirmed there will be playable 10th edition at Warhammer Fest. So I want to see how it works in practice. But I hope it's good. I really hope it's good.
Yeah, I mean, so as somebody who plays with kids at school in my Warhammer club, I have rules that eternally are the problem. Like kids don't have a lot of money, even less than poor adults, and certainly not a lot of free money. And rules are eternally the problem that they have trouble. They're not going to buy. They don't have the models that they want or anything close to the models that they want. They don't have the modeling equipment that they need. buying rules is just really far down on the list of things that they want to do. And Warhammer requiring you to buy rules to kind of keep up with, keep your army competitive. But the other thing about working with kids is the new kids, right? Every September, I get a bevy of new kids. They've maybe bought some Warhammer. They want to know how to play. And actually, they do a good job, Warhammer, with those kind of rookie sets of teaching you some basic rules. The problem is the step between those basic rules and actually playing the game is enormous.
Oh my, yes it is.
And I would really want to see an officially sanctioned, more casual way to play.
Like
with simpler missions, maybe like combat patrol-sized armies that used power level, which I know you're not keen on, but I was. It was just like, if you want to play casual, here is the kind of authorized format for casual. It's 500 points. It's on a 2x4 board. It's played like this.
Funny, you should say that.
If we were like kind of in a world that made sense, I think that Warhammer would genuinely be the most casual game on the market, because it has the most obligation to be a casual game. It has the biggest audience of casual players. And it's still a shock to me that it's taken Games Workshop this long to realize that there is a huge cadre of people who would be interested in playing Warhammer if it was more casual friendly. And I am excited by the idea that they do seem to be realizing that. And obviously, they kind of understood that. They tried that with Age of Sigmar. They tried it with the power system as opposed to the point system. They tried to make it a little bit easier to kind of build. And they've tried to do onboarding with, like videos and with their starter sets and things. But yeah, at its core, Warhammer is still always struck me as a very inaccessible game. Where to even start, And the season model of 9th edition was kind of a part of that. And actually, another concern I have with 10th edition is that they still seem to be very committed to this season model. And what that means is that not only can we maybe expect codices to be constantly coming out that are, adding new rules and adding new detachments and power creep making a return, but also there's going to be these new narrative stories, these books set in the game, like the Arc of Omens, where there's 5 different books all coming out, all trying to tell this story, all with their own little scenarios, kind of leaving people a little bit confused as to what the hell they're actually meant to be buying, Like if there's like a new book coming out every 3 months that's saying this is the new story on Warhammer, I don't know if there's that feels like quite an onerous grind to me. Yeah. I can stomach an expansion a year maybe, but like a book every 3 months, I don't know.
And if there was a genuinely sort of casual format, again, the problem with those books is if those books are squarely aimed at tournament players, this is the hyper competitive end of the game. This is going to continue to develop and grow for those that want that. The problem is that those books correct imbalance as well as powering up new units. So you kind of need them.
Yeah. Well,
whereas if they separate those two things out, then it would. That's what I would say. My things about being more casual friendly and so forth is fixing that casual version of the game.
What's like having codexes for, as you say, competitive, and then once a year do the the rejiggery.
You do your codex still if you really need to, but the stuff like the Arcs of Omen and the competitive play package that they had in 9th edition, that is considered as a competitive only thing. That's not also a place for rules errata. For things that are broken, that you keep those two aspects separate.
I'm worried that they're going to start putting detachments, which are the 10th edition sub-faction system, the way, like right now you kind of, you pick a Space Marine chapter or whatever. Well, they're not going to be called detachments and they're not going to be split along specific chapters, which sounds good. I kind of like that. I like the ability of being a little bit more flexible in how you build your forces and things and being able to try different play styles regardless of how you've customized your models. But I'm worried that they're going to start putting these detachment options inside the books, which they did in the past. I hope they learned their lesson with that and that they won't do it again. But I have a question for you, Kaiser. So whenever you play there was a way I could have put this question. Whenever you play with children, do they play with the codex only? Because I know a lot of people that I play with casually with Warhammer, they don't look for FAQs. They actively just kind of ignore FAQs, and they'll just play with the codex as written. Like, they'll just open their codex and they will just read from the book. Like, an FAQ at this stage, like if a codex gets released overpowered, like, that's too bad. Like, because that's what they have. They bought the codex and we're just gonna do that. They're not gonna be on their phone, checking the latest rules. Is that would that be the same with the kind of the more like children and like more casual players that
children watch a lot of YouTube, and they watch YouTube on things that they're interested in. So they hear that all everyone's talking about is the new Arcs of Omen detachment has made Necron Immortals great.
Yeah.
They do know that.
Tier list. Yeah.
They very much get infected. And the other thing is they are part of a community. It's a club. So the kind of kids in year 11 and even the odd sixth former that plays, they do play at that level. That's for them, Warhammer is their game. Which is why I do take kids to Warhammer World to compete in their school's event, because there are some kids that put that work in. But I can tell you that for those guys, and one of the kids is 17, he's played Warhammer since he was 12, getting them to learn that mission format and actually to force them to play it so that when they get there, they know how to do it. That was really tough because they just didn't want to do it.
They just didn't want to play that system.
They don't want to play that way. They don't enjoy it. And I'm saying, look, you've got to do this. If we're going to go and compete and you want to win, is you're going to have to get used to when you score and which secondaries. They don't like it. I don't like it. And I'm talking about kids, the ones that are going to be decent at that event are 15 to 17. And Warhammer is their principal game. Yeah. All this aside, though, just going back to Bob, I'm not parting with my dollars. I think it will be, and I don't think 9th was bad on release. I think it will be good on release. The question is whether that kind of index version of it will stay intact, whether it will survive, or whether we are going to be compelled, maybe because they delete stuff.
John? Yeah, maybe. I just want to say that I still have 8th edition all indexes sitting over there, and I actually played a game a couple of weekends ago.
Yeah,
and it worked perfectly fine.
Yeah,
nights on nights.
Yeah,
that is an option too, guys. You keep the books and you play the system that you want to play, or the edition that you want to play.
You have to have a group though that are willing to do that, which is actually kind of honestly quite rare, I think. I sort of want to go back and play some 4th edition personally. Like I'm currently working on a Space Marine army on the channel, and I'm kind of like half tempted to be building that force for. I bought a Predator for that force, even though everyone was like, "Don't buy a Predator. Predators are rubbish." And I'm like, "Yeah, but the Predator's also in 4th edition. All these new Primaris tanks aren't." So I kind of want to play some 4th edition, but like I'll have to find somebody and be like, "Do you want to play 4th edition?" And I'll have to convince them that it's worth it and that they should play. And that's gonna be a bit of an ask. And then the question will be like, why don't we just play 1-page rules? And I'll be like, I just want to nostalgia, bro. Like let me enjoy myself.
Come on.
Yeah. I want to play Inquisition again. I want to play my Witch Hunter army. Let me play Witch Hunters.
I think the thing with the escalation, because that's what it is, right? Like John's just said about 8th edition, and is we can all sit here, and I suppose that's kind of part of the message. Is like, well, you could go back and you could play 5th edition if you wanted to. So, yeah, I could. The thing is that when I started playing 9th edition, I didn't know at that moment that it was going to become much worse than what I was playing up to that point. Yeah. And you go along with the progress, and you become increasingly dissatisfied with it. Yeah. So you've followed along several steps before you've really started to think, I think it was better back there.
Yeah, it grinds you. It grinds you out, right?
It's just more and more work. It's not so much the money. I can choose to ignore things that cost money because it's all available for free online if you really want it, right? It's not just that for me. It was always the rules, but it was the realization. So if I wanted to go back and play 8th, it isn't going to be easy for me to mentally unpack the ways in which it's different to 9th.
Yeah.
Because there were procedural changes in the way combat works and things like that, you know, and I'd worry that I was not actually playing the 8th that I remember, and unpacking and unlearning when you weren't really keeping accurate records of that in your brain, right?
You have to really go back to it. You have to like go back and like read the rule books and get really invested again in the system. Yeah, I totally agree. It's not quite as simple as just like jumping back into it. Although I do think that if you go back even further, it is a little bit easier.
Because the rules are quite different.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think it is just as easy to pick it up. Some aspects of it, not the nuances maybe, but at least the core of the game itself. Unless you've defragged your hard drive, in which case it would be very difficult. But yeah, there should still be some remnant information in there. Back to 10th edition, I want to pick up on something that Kaiser said about with the kids and that, and like self-contained game and having it like that. What do we guys think of the whole patrol box format? You did mention that. That's something they're doing. What's it called? What are they called? The
Combat Patrol. It's just Combat Patrol. Yeah.
They're bringing that out as this is it. This is battle in a box.
No. So, but I think they've talked about a Combat Patrol way of playing 10th.
Yes. Yeah.
Those boxes will be better balanced in the future, because at the moment they're balanced around a price point.
Yeah.
The boarding patrols are not all exactly the same price, interestingly. Ooh. So they've obviously experimented with breaking them on. But no, those boarding patrols, they're all gone. They're limited runs.
Oh.
If you hadn't realized that, for anyone that doesn't know, you can't buy them. If you want the one that's coming out, you need to pre-order it on Saturday, because they're limited prints, and they've been clear about that for people who read the GW newsfeed every day. I don't know how clear that is to normal people.
It's not.
No, but they're not like the new Combat Patrol. They are limited runs, presumably to get some money in before April the 5th or whenever their financial year turns over.
Well, funnily enough, though, the boarding patrol kind of rule set that they've said will not be going away, though, in 10th. That the Arcs of Omen will still be playable. So that's why we'd want to, though, I honestly have no idea, especially if this new Combat Patrol system is coming into place, because Combat Patrol basically replaces that idea for me. Combat Patrol, I'm actually really excited about the Combat Patrol system. I love the idea of being able to play a kind of smaller version of Warhammer, and for that being supported very well. I think that's really cool. I think that's exactly what the game has needed. That it was my criticism of Boarding Patrol was always that they have this smaller scale version of Warhammer, and then they jump on top of that and say, but you'll also need to buy like $300 worth of terrain, and that just seems so alien to me. But the idea of Combat Patrol is being, you buy a box, you've got your box, you've got your stats free online, you've got your detachment thing online as well, and I can say to you, do you want to play a Combat Patrol game this weekend? And you go, yep. And we can actually just go and play that game. Hell, you could buy a Combat Patrol and we could... And the
missions are kill the enemy wizard, stand over here, have more models on the enemy's half of the table, like really simple, old-fashioned missions.
I think that's really fun. Now, there are problems with this system, I think. One is that if it's just literally you buy a box and there's no customization of your force, that means it's not going to be a lot of army building, which is good, but it's also bad, right? So on the one hand, it's kind of bad because it means that firstly, some armies might be stuck with a bad Combat Patrol and they can't really do anything about that. And some armies just might not be fun in this game mode. But also, I think that people might start to realize that the core gameplay of Warhammer isn't like the strongest ever if you don't have like a large component of army building. Like the main mechanic that Warhammer 40k does better than anybody else is army building, is having this very in-depth army building system. So if you get rid of that for just a kind of identikit Combat Patrol off you pop, you might start to realize that actually you're not making a ton of tactical decisions on the board. Most of the time, your decisions were being made off board beforehand.
Shush your mouth. It's awesome.
I actually massively disagree. John, you played a lot of games with me, smaller games, 500 points, 1,000 points, where you've got 3 objectives on the table, spaced out in a V shape.
Yeah.
I find those games far more tactical because you cannot do all of the things. I don't know how you find it. I think the choice is really important. Do I move or do I fight? Is very important. You know, and
Cool.
I think One Page Rules does a similar. It works similarly in that there are more objectives than you're going to have models left at that point in the game, right?
Yeah.
And in order to win, you've got to make choices.
I totally agree. I'm a big fan of those types of scenarios. I've seen that there's been a ton of people like really concerned about whether or not the game will be fun at that level, but I think that it will.
I think they need to try it. I think they need to try it. Board games manage to make interesting tactical simulations by having 3 models each, or 3 wooden cubes each. You know, I think it's entirely possible. You need to force people to choose about whether they want to fight or they want to do the objective thing. Limited turns is another really important part of that. So the whole thing is compressed down.
Yeah.
But still, to be successful, it's still got to keep it simple. And that's what I worry about, the combat patrol. So there is in 9th edition, there is so you can play this at 500 points and you get a different number of command points and should play on a different size board. So yeah, but I'm still playing this still god-awful mission format with this same god-awful list building.
Yes.
It's still got all of those other really crappy things. So, and I think I'm gutted that they took away power level. I really have. I know you don't agree. And we probably shouldn't go into it now because it's almost time up. Look,
fight.
But the other thing about combat patrols, I was not under the impression, and you read a lot more of this stuff than I am, that the combat patrol was in any way limited to those boxes. Only that they were going to they were going to change the contents of the boxes going forwards in 10th. That was a combat patrol that you could play out of the box, not that you had to.
Oh, you're making me doubt myself, but I'm almost 100% certain that so that it's based on those boxes, those actual combat patrol boxes are what you bring to the table, and that's it. But I could be wrong. That
seems bad. That seems like really bad because that doesn't encourage people to buy more models. That seems bad for them money-wise.
It does, though. I think it encourages people to buy more combat patrols for other factions because I know I would do if I can buy like a little like I would treat it almost like a skirmish game at that stage where I kind of want to try the different play styles of the different factions. You
mean like Kill Team? You think I'm going to alternative activations is a mistake for the game? Yeah, everyone does. Look, I was really, really like Kill Team, right? But I was also terrified that 10th edition might look something like it. Because what they've done with Kill Team, it's so different, and you need to completely get your head into that headspace and reread the rules before you play the game. Because it's so massively different. And after like 6 games, I still think I'm getting stuff wrong around the order of dice choice in Melee.
To be honest, though, I think that that's just the way they write the rules. Honestly, Kill Team is a game I think that it's really hard to get into because the rule book is so convoluted and it's written in such like the different stages where I haven't read the book in about a year, but I still have nightmares about trying to figure out what stance my units are in, and the melee system. I remember it being fun, but
it is fun.
Yeah, I just couldn't get into
the order of
game.
Operations is really important.
Yeah,
and crits do work different in melee to in shooting.
Yeah,
and so forth. It's a game. It's a game that if I'd had more time, I wish I'd put more time into, because I think it's a. But yeah, 10th, as Duncan FX points out, there is no shape-based movement in 10th edition. they haven't gone
triangles connected to the circle.
Yeah, they haven't. Because there was some talk about it being quite radically different going forwards, and I was thinking, I know they like to experiment with new potential rules through other systems, right?
Yeah.
And clearly Kill Team has shown them that people are not ready for that kind of radical changing of the rules.
Kill Team really felt like a game that had been made after the designers had played like a bunch of other games one day. And we're like, oh my God, I didn't know people were doing this. Yeah, like, whoa. Have you guys seen these like measurement wizards that Fantasy Flight are using? Holy hell. we gotta be doing some of that, like it really did. I actually like that about Kill Team though. Kill Team was kind of refreshing to come to as someone who's played a lot of Games Workshop games. I was like, oh my God, this doesn't work exactly the same way as every single other Games Workshop product ever made, where I've got to roll a 4+. I've got to roll to hit, to wound,
That's true, but that was the only refreshing part of it. The rest of it was like, this is still a dick game with dick rules.
Well, I kind of enjoyed Kill Team. My problem with Kill Team was that it felt like the side objectives were kind of encouraging me to play and to not win the actual scenarios I was playing in. I love linked campaign games and I love role playing in games. And so whenever I actually came to play the side objective, my guard were encouraged to just get killed during battles instead of actually win the match. There was no incentive for me to actually play the objective on the board. And so that just kind of felt really weird.
Because the cards in your hand offered much better scoring potential.
Yeah,
and that's the thing, isn't it? Which is again this kind of scoring to win, this board gamey way to play the game, rather than crushing the enemy on the battlefield. Which I don't care what anybody says, that is what we started wargaming for. That is what we want to do. And I want to be rewarded.
I don't know.
Winning with elimination of the women.
Y'all are too violent. Look, I actually. So there is a little game that no one has played called the Batman miniature game. Okay, and in that game, there are no on the board objectives. It isn't about fighting your opponent. You have a deck of cards that give you objectives, and that game is one of the funnest games I've played. Precisely because those objectives are used to make every faction feel completely different, to play asymmetrically, and they have a lot going on. But Warhammer does this kind of thing where it doesn't feel like the factions are super asymmetric, and it's very convoluted cards and objective scoring, and it just doesn't feel as fun. I just think that it's poorly implemented. I honestly think that the idea of having objective cards and secondary objectives could be fun. It just has to be executed in a certain way. It has to be executed well. And I think that's ultimately my current conception of 10th edition is I hope it's good. I hope it gets executed well, right? It's all about the execution. It's all about the execution. And I'm hopeful and cautiously optimistic that they will indeed, that they have taken on. There's been a lot of feedback directed to them. I hope that someone over there has been watching my channel. I've had a lot of feedback to give. And so I hope some of that's made its way to them, and that they will make some changes to the core systems, and that they'll be thoughtful about how they implement the codices and how they implement the kind of these systems, and that their entire perspective is informed by the idea that having a good, fun game sells more miniatures than having a bad game does. And I just hope that is what they care about, right? To be TBD, right? To be determined.
Right. Hope. I'm totally convinced they're just going to fall back on exactly the same systems they've used before, because it generates money, and because I don't think they're not gonna get that hate when the first Codex comes out about, right, okay, you've already broken it now, and what we'll do is exactly what we did with 8th, which is we'll go along with it, and then as individuals we will reach that point where we think, this has gone too far, I no longer enjoy it. But that will have been incremental.
So in the short term, I think it makes them more money to resell all of the rules again, and to resell the kind of the campaign system and the codices and the detachments and the stratagems, like stratagem card packs. In the short term, it makes them more money. In the long term, though, I think it hurts their brand pretty substantially. Now, that said, though, there is a way to look at it that doesn't matter. That long-term harm will be done with people who have already been monetized and left the hobby. Who cares about them? We're making new TV shows. We're making new games. That's going to get more people in. We can do it again in 12th edition. But there is definitely a perspective, but that would be very cynical, Kaiser. And I'm not a cynical person at all. I'm very. I am I always look on the bright side. So I hope that that's not the case. But I mean, I'm gonna be extremely bummed out if the system does move exactly the same way. And I do feel like it's not too charged a word to say it's a bit of a betrayal about their intentions and how they've portrayed the game and how they've marketed the game, and that it will be 100% a lie, and that they should be raked over the coals for every single book that they release if it does indeed turn out the way that you're worried that it will turn out, Kaiser.
If it turns out really bad, can you please do a skit where what film is it? It's where the guy drops to his knees, Sheen or something, and he's like screaming. Vietnam film, do that. Can you just do that?
Yes, I promise you now, Johnny.
Thank you.
I make this solemn oath to you. On this I swear, I will indeed do that skit. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Like I will be incredibly disappointed if this game does not, because I think they've got a golden opportunity here to pull in a ton of casual players to grow the size of the community. And I've seen a lot of people in the chat basically saying, I'm a BattleTech player, I don't care. I'm so glad I've moved on to BattleTech. But look, here's the thing. If Warhammer 40k is a better game, it's better for every other war game out there as well. Because whenever people get into Warhammer and they play Warhammer 40k, if it is a fun game, if they enjoy it, they might think, you know what, I actually quite enjoy this whole wargaming thing. I might try some other games and see what other experiences are out there. If they play Warhammer 40k and they dislike the game and they think this is trash, they will have no interest in trying any other game ever. I had a friend recently play Bolt Action, and he said he was surprised that it was fun because his only experience was getting absolutely demolished in a Warhammer Fantasy game 20 years ago. So he thought the wargaming sucked. He thought that like there was no point in it. It was just all army building, and then that was it. He was actually surprised that a game could be fun that was a war game, and that's really sad to me because they can be a lot of fun, and that's what I want. I want a fun game. I want a fun war game, and right now, a fun war game kind of runs contrary to the business model of Games Workshop, and they're talking as if they're changing their business model. I hope they are. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt, but like you, I do share your concerns. Like I do share your concerns, but I have to be encouraging to this type of change because, like I have to encourage that type of change. I have to go into this with an open mind.
Good.
Yeah. I mean, I think. But I what I would say is kind of as consumers is as we go into 10th edition, just to remember what we've learned from 9th and 8th before it, after the disaster rules pile, which was 7th, is that moment of release might just be the best version of the game. So don't race off to get the next and the next and the next with the rules, and maybe make sure you keep hold of that version of the game.
Let us consumers control the pace.
If there's any hope in that, it lies in the competitive gamers. I'm just saying, for all those haters of competitive players out there, if competitive players decide not to move, if they create their own community rule set, if they stick with a certain version of the game, well, c'est la vie. Games Workshop are kind of bunged then, like competitive players have a lot of, the thing about competitive play is that it's organized play, which means that players are organized and they can make decisions, and there can be, and I'm saying like, you don't really get that with like casual or narrative players that much. Competitive play has a ton of power in the community. Let us hope they wield it for good.
So Dwayne, Plastic Crack Gaming, he disagrees. He says, I believe GW actually do more damage to the hobby than good. Wargaming would have less exposure, and that's a fact. For the age we live in, it would be a slow, more organic rather than the churn. I think that's a fair point. That's a fair point. I think. Fair point.
But how many of us? How many? As you've said in many videos, Mr. Kaiser, how many people have started off with that gateway drug that is Games Workshop on the high street?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it is.
But hobby shops are back on the rise, though. So the reason Games Workshop wasn't the gateway drug for me, D&D Redbox was, and I went to a hobby shop. I played Games Workshop when a Games Workshop opened many years later. But the first thing I was into was role-playing. But the hobby shops all died. But they're coming back now because of the cafe model. That they are...
that definitely has a big impact. I think having the independent
gateway drug these days is you talk to kids in 30 years' time and it'll be Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh, because that's what got them in those
war game. Where's the Pokemon war game, bro?
No, but I mean that those collectible card games that kids play play, that will get them into those hobby shops where they see those other games.
Magic the Gathering and things. I think that a good game of War, if Warhammer is a fun game to play, I think that is a much better advertisement for the wargaming hobby than a bad game, right? Like, because I think that it makes wargaming generally look bad. I'm still undecided as to whether or not Warhammer is a net negative or net benefit to wargaming generally speaking. But at the end of the day, I think if Warhammer wasn't around, there would probably be a brand that had kind of ossified the wargaming hobby around it.
I think
maybe
you're probably
Battletech
right.
or something.
Yeah, or maybe the hobby wouldn't be what it is. I mean, you go around Warlord and they all work for Games Workshop in terms of supplying the industry with sculptors and artists and so forth. As poorly as they treat those people, they all cut their teeth there.
Yeah.
And
they do.
Big company churning through young talent, there probably wouldn't be that talent out there.
Well, maybe there would. You know, it's all hypotheticals. To be honest, I in my opinion though, it does tend to be a little bit easier to get board gamers into like skirmish war games than Warhammer players. To be honest, because they don't come in with the same preconceived notions, and they're kind of used to the idea of like gaming as well, right? So like, I think the rise of board games is really good for wargaming too.
Yeah,
sure.
True.
Yeah, true. I mean, again, those cafes that sell both, I think they're very good things for that. Okay, so because a lot of people won't know this if they're not, a lot of war gamers are not role players. Subs has mentioned, because you covered this in great detail, the recent D&D debacle shows what fans can do when they get together. So we're already at time, but can you give sort of 2 minutes, tell people what happened there? Because it was a big deal and it shows what people can do if they really stick together.
I don't think that. So part of the problem is that the D&D audience and the Warhammer audience, I think, are very distinctly different. So very quickly, in January, I think the OGL scandal, people have probably heard about it. It was the open gaming license for Dungeons and Dragons, which is maintained by Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro. Wizards of the Coast quietly tried to change this license that a lot of third-party content creators rely on. And I don't mean like YouTubers. I mean like people who make RPGs, people who make supplement books for Dungeons and Dragons. They rely on this open license to make games, and Wizards of the Coast wanted to change that. So Wizards of the Coast there was a ton of changes. They were all bad for creators though. They would include things like royalty fees. If you were making a certain amount of money, it would mean that they would have to prior approve the games. And there was a huge outcry from the community, a massive outcry. People began canceling their D&D Beyond subs. People began actively seeking out other games and trying to do it. There was a whole huge movement. My local D&D club had discussions about whether or not they would change the name from Northern Ireland Dungeons and Dragons to something different. So it was wild. Like it penetrated the market in a really, really big way. And as a result, Wizards of the Coast walked back the changes. And not only that, but they actually ended up going even further and enshrining some of it in the Creative Commons. So there was a huge change to things. And we've seen similar sort of events occur with Warhammer. For example, with the content creators, there was the NDA scandal as well. If you remember that a couple of years back, whenever Games Workshop were sending out NDAs to smaller content creators that were absolutely ludicrous. People forget about that, but it's absolutely crazy. And there's never been the same amount of outcry. Now, I think that the reason for this is because D&D has a very wide casual audience of people who play the game and they're not super invested monetarily into the system. Warhammer is different. Warhammer has a small cadre of people who spend a lot of money on the game, which means that they have a ton of incentive they've got a lot of sunk costs in the game, basically. And there isn't the same type of appetite for sort of trying out another system because people are kind of invested in the miniatures of Warhammer. So I just think it's a completely different culture in Warhammer, unfortunately. And I think it's a worse culture, right? Like I think that the culture is less able to get change done. Like it's weird. In the Dungeons and Dragons community, whenever I criticize Wizards of the Coast, people go, oh yeah, fair point. In the Warhammer community, I get called negative. So I don't know. Like it's very, very different vibes for sure, you know. There's a more of a I guess people don't believe that Wizards of the Coast own the role-playing game hobby. There are people who genuinely believe that there is a Warhammer hobby and it is owned by Games Workshop, and that I think is a massive problem.
Is a phrase that Warhammer use all the time.
Yeah, the Warhammer hobby,
exclusively Warhammer. Yeah.
And I people think that whenever I go on a lot about this, that like it's not the Warhammer hobby, it's the wargaming hobby, as if it's this kind of like strange intellectualized point that doesn't make. But I actually think that it's really important to the mindset of consumers in the market that they are willing to actually try other competitors. It's actually why I think that 1PH Rules is really important, because 1PH Rules actively encourages people to play a different system with their same Warhammer miniatures, and that's why I've always argued that 1PH Rules is a much greater existential threat for Warhammer than say something like Mantic Games or like Bolt Action, right? Because it encourages you to just play with the same minis. And I think the Games Workshop are great, because a lot of 10th edition seems to be inspired by 1PH Rules and some of the changes that they have brought in.
So you mentioned Mantic now is another interesting one. I mean, I think the truth of Warhammer, and it's sad but factual to say, because we interact with a lot of different companies, we play a lot of different games, is their models are massively better than anything else on the market. And I don't care what you think. If you think differently, you're wrong. Their models are way better.
No, I disagree.
You tell me someone who makes a better kit than
you cannot start this argument like at this time.
Mantic make kits that models don't fit together.
Oh, perfection.
I think we can judge miniatures on a lot of different axes. I think it really depends on what you're talking about. I think that Games Workshop are very good at creating crisp miniatures with very sharp details. I agree with you there, especially when it comes to hard plastic. But I don't think that they have the best design sense anymore. And I don't think that they're the funnest miniatures to assemble. And I don't think that they're the funnest miniatures to paint. I actually think that I don't think that they're the most dynamic looking miniatures. I don't think they're the most beautiful looking miniatures. And these are all, I can point to other manufacturers that I would say have much prettier models than Games Workshop. I look at the Night Models minis, and I think some of those absolutely blow Games Workshop out of the water. I look at Black Scorpion minis, and I think that they blow Games Workshop out of the money when it comes to looks. Those are resin minis, though, right?
Resin, yeah. No, you can point to any of these people, and if I go and look, I'll tell you why they're not. Right. They're resin, they're metal, there's 3 sculpts, whatever it is.
My point is that there are different criteria for this. And I would not feel comfortable saying that Games Workshop create the best minis, because I don't enjoy assembling Games Workshop minis. And so I don't think they can be the best miniatures if I genuinely don't enjoy engaging with them. If I don't enjoy building the minis, like, are they the best minis? They might look good, but that's like having a video game that has absolutely beautiful graphics, but the gameplay sucks. Like, who cares about the graphics? It's not the best video game for me.
It's sold really well.
Well, I guess my point, though, is that there are subjective criteria and there's objective criteria. And I agree with you that the minis are very crisp. But I think they've been going downhill in terms of, fun to assemble and the design of them as well.
I don't find any plastic miniatures fun to assemble, but I still... I prefer one piece sculpts personally. I don't actually enjoy assembling miniatures, but that's me.
I love assembling minis.
Okay,
generally,
but I don't see how you can, in terms of the comprehensiveness of range, the fact that it's difficult to find new things. There are old things that are still out there, but it's difficult to find new things that are not very good. And I think that's the problem. Is the market wants hard plastic. The market wants modular. The market wants nice miniatures, of which there are more than 3 of to choose from. And Games Workshop have that in every category.
No, they don't.
And there isn't a company.
I disagree. I totally disagree with you. I think that the Games Workshop minis, I think that they have, in terms of the ideas of the minis, I've definitely gotten a lot more audacious, which are great. But I think that the actual designs of the minis have been really boring. There are lots of rocks every single time. There's someone with a foot on a rock. The poses have become the same thing over and over again. They are monopose models, which means you're seeing constant repeats of the same mini when you have any more than 10 guys in a squad. You've got constant cultists are like showing up the game. I don't know. Like I kind of disagree. I feel like they'd be better off just making resin models at this stage. It's kind of what they want to do.
You don't see this from other companies. Well, Games Workshop have got 10 versions.
do.
Other companies have got 3, 2, or even 1. And then
honestly, though,
how do I make an army out of these other
I bought a squad of 30 German soldiers from Warlord Games, and I sat and I had a bloody good evening assembling those models, making decisions about how they were posed, making decisions about what they were doing, you know, getting to decide the little vignette, the little tale that I wanted to tell, the creative hobby side of things. That to me was far more enjoyable than I agree that the models look beautiful, but I don't know if I would say that they're the best minis on the market. I don't know if I would say that.
So to use your example, right? Here's exactly the point, right? So you just described a very new Warlord plastic infantry sprue, all right? And it's good. It's good. But what happens when you need a bazooka?
Get me to do it.
What happens when you need a light machine gun? What happens when you need a P-18? Well, you have to go and buy a 30-year-old metal sculpt of a dude whose head's slightly crick-necked.
That's not true. They've got
absolutely
those on the sprue now. They've got them on the sprue now.
No,
they have them in the plastic kit.
Yeah,
they have all those options.
There isn't a Panzerschreck. They don't make a plastic Panzerschreck.
Look, I get what you're saying. That obviously, you know, the support teams and stuff. There's elements of the model range generally. Like you're talking about the totality of the model range.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is GW doesn't have that. GW will do you
because GW doesn't have options. They don't have the idea of a support team. They have, you bought the box, you've built what's in the box, you're done now. And that to me is anathema. That's the opposite of what we want from.
I mean, just talking louder doesn't make you more right. You understand that?
No, but come on. Okay, like come on though. Like you get what I'm saying, right? Like the idea that I could build a mini with a bazooka, is not like that's not how Games Workshop do it, right? You're saying that I would have to go.
But what you're saying. I'm telling you that the full range is available in hard plastic. And if you go to anybody else, it isn't. You're saying, that's because the way they've structured their armament. Saying, no. In a way, bolt action, you've got guy with machine gun, guy with rifle, guy with submachine gun, and guy with anti-tank weapon. And that's only 4, and they're not all available in plastic. You cannot make that criticism. I love bolt action. And you know, and I would defend it fiercely because they're not big enough. They can't afford to make all of those options. But what I'm telling you about the Games Workshop experience is there is a plastic kit for everything you could ever want. That may not be the case for a handful of Xenos factions that are waiting for their range refresh. I accept that. Okay, I know you played Dark Eldar and you're not happy with all of your options. Skaven, they don't. Okay. Yeah, it's not available fully for everything niche, but they will do it. And I'm telling you that you're going to wait a long time to see an 80mm mortar in hard plastic from Bolt Action.
Look, I take your point. I agree that
I think I've got two. I've got the same 2 derpy guys with the odd pose in metal.
Right. I agree that Games Workshop, their range, you know, obviously, I think it's probably one of the more accessible ranges out there. Probably like one of the most accessible ranges because of all the hard plastic. I totally agree. But I think that's a separate point from do they make the best miniatures? Right. I think that's a separate point.
Well, I was sort of taking it from the consumer in the round. I am not saying they are the best value. I am not saying that I like that. I'm saying that there is a level of quality across the range. And where it isn't, they have been addressing that over the years. And the reason that's important is from the person buying it perspective. If you play another game system, you're very quickly going to find yourself having to deal with resin or trying to find a third party, somebody else making a model that they don't have. And I'm talking about fairly big companies like even Battlefront Flames of War. You can't get Africa Corps Infantry for 2 years. Like this is a really big theater of the war. A lot of people want to play it. They don't make it at the moment, so you're going to have to look for somebody else's. And then they're different sizes, and you know, or they've got really big hands, or whatever.
I agree with you. Like I've been really enjoying Conflict 47 from Warlord Games, but obviously the vast majority of the range is, you know, you've got your hard plastic for all the historical stuff, but for the crazy mechs and the zombies and the werewolves, they're all metal. And obviously trying to sell that to somebody, especially somebody new to the hobby, that's kind of tough for sure. And I totally agree with you there. But what I take exception to is this idea that Games Workshop make the most beautiful minis on the market. I don't think that that's the case. I think they make some of the most beautiful, and I think it's arguable that they do, but I don't think that they do. I don't think it's like a settled question.
No, you said do.
Because I think that there are some Joker Goon miniatures from Night Models that absolutely blow every single thing that Games Workshop I've ever made out of the water.
Companies, you can certainly find better models on a case by case basis. It's the consistency of the range, which I think that's really what I'm trying to get at. Maybe you don't like monopros, maybe you didn't like building that model. But I'm telling you that when you go for somebody else's, you buy the support weapon pack and realize these guys have got different size heads. Right, that's the reality of working with other companies.
I agree with you. Games Workshop definitely 100% have the most consistent. They have the most consistent miniatures on the market. 100%. I agree with you there. I think that's definitely true. And I'd say probably consistently high quality as well. Is pretty fair. You know, if you don't want to deal with resin, right? If you just do not want to deal with resin and you don't want to deal with metal minis, then Games Workshop are probably a very good option for you, for sure. Although now Blood and Plunder apparently as well. Just saying, it seems like their entire range is actually moving the hard plastic now.
Is it?
Well, I mean, what?
I know what the new stuff is.
Yeah, they're selling ships. They're selling sloops. So obviously they haven't moved to like galleons or anything, but they're selling sloops in hard plastic. They're selling their soldier units in hard plastic. They're selling the sailors. They're selling the militia. They're selling the cavalry. They're selling the special pirate leaders. Like what else? What else do you need in hard plastic, right? Like that's basically it. So
yeah, absolutely. No, I wasn't trying to defend them. I was trying to kind of make a point about why it does have such a strong appeal and why it does have such a hold on them.
That is a result of them being like by massive, very large degrees bigger than everybody else in the market and having these huge factories and being able to be, you know, to have so much money pumped into it for sure. You know, for sure. Like that is a result of that. Wow, that is an incredible mini. We other companies need to sell things in metal and in resin, right? Because they can't sell it any other way. They need to. And that's why I get that, right? I understand that. And
nobody agrees with me, by the way. Hello, MfA and Miss Discourse. Nobody agrees with me, by the way. I think it's important to try and understand the hold that it has. I think it's very important and its enduring appeal. Well, anyway, hobby-wise, where did I get to? I painted faces and hands on many of these guys, although not quite finished. But I know John is desperate to get to sleep.
Got red on them.
Hooray!
The most important color. Kaiser, please, can I ask you one historical question, please?
One historical question. Go for it.
Did the Romans actually wear red, or was that
not
just
really?
Yes.
Well, hold on. I'm getting
more this sort of creamy color, you know.
Oh.
Do you want? How long do you want on this? Right.
No.
Red.
No.
All night. Yes.
The two most common colors are red and not colored.
Undyed.
Oh, okay.
Red dye is very cheap to make
because it's just strawberries squished up. Right.
Oh, but purple was really tough, right? Like purple was like really hard.
Hence it's an imperial color. Yeah, absolutely. So you will commonly find them, but actually, kind of in the high watermark, every legion a different color. So you can
really.
When you look
really, they had different colors. Oh my god! Could you do like a rainbow legion, like rainbow legions of like all different colors each?
Rainbow. That's probably more your Greek sacred band dudes. They were very much in the pro LGBT stuff. Yeah, they were very much. Well, the idea being is that if the man standing next to you in the phalanx is your lover, you will fight harder to keep him alive.
That's
too.
It. Yeah.
So they're very much into that in the sacred band.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Sacred Band of Thebes, I think. It was positively encouraged.
It's always fantastic to me just how brighter the past was than I think people imagine, you know.
We look at the past and assume that it has values that our grandparents had, but worse.
Yeah.
Whereas actually, for example, the Romans didn't really have a problem with race at all.
Mm-hmm.
They had a problem with foreigners. But that wasn't because they were white or black or Greek or whatever else, you know.
Yeah,
it was just like you dress differently. That's important. So as Roman citizenship extends throughout the empire, there are very little in the way of written references, sort of disparagingly talking about people in terms of skin color, but there are a lot of comments about how many senators wear trousers. Because
that's incredible,
balls, right?
Yeah. Okay, I love that.
That's not right. It's not even that he's foreign. It's just adopting non-Roman ways. It's a very, very different attitude to these things. That doesn't mean that they weren't bigots of all kinds of things, but they didn't see race in the way that we see race. For example, the skeleton horde. Very interesting. Killed babies though, so not so bright. As Carthaginians, surely they're well into that.
Yeah, man.
Apparently.
As well.
I'm coming round to thinking that they probably did, just not often.
We continue on the proud tradition of the Romans, though, right? By painting our miniatures, because that's what they did with all their statues. They painted them all pretty colors, right? They probably had their own null oil and everything, liquid talent in a bottle. Yeah, we're just carrying on that proud tradition of us sculpting and.
Stongan FX says there's a niche model range, trouser-wearing senators. Maybe they'll bring it out in Gangs of Rome.
Gangs of Rome would be perfect for that. Yeah,
I think it might be a bit earlier than that. I think it's late Republican.
That's an incredible niche game. Gangs of Rome, a skirmish-based Roman historical game. Like that's incredible.
Murdering each other on the streets.
Funded, I think. Gonna get some plastic Roman dudes from War Games Atlantic for that.
Oh, War Games Atlantic doing the models.
Yeah, some of them, anyways.
That'll be nice. The reason John was painting those three Romans, if you don't know, we were running SPQR, a skirmish war game. We've been running a campaign in which John has lost nearly every battle, but not quite all of them.
All of them.
All of them. All of them. We're only on battle 5.
Yeah.
But
it's not a snowballing situation, is it? It's not like
no, because I've got laser beam Greek friggin' peltasts, but still it's not. I don't think it's the game or the minis.
Oh, alas.
Possibly.
Yeah, and it's a really good example for anyone to see how you can still have a lot of fun with quite a bad system. It is a very we've been having a lot of fun with that game. I mean, having characters called Biggest Dickus and so forth in a campaign, that kind of thing helps you to enjoy it. But Viagrix is dead now. I need a new druid.
There's been some good names come out of the community for that.
Yeah,
I think we should choose one.
But it's a terrible system. John's doing a little bit better now because we've decided the system is imbalanced and started making some homebrew.
Yeah.
On our
so the Romans now have automatic weapons, which really does help with the sustained fire dice. Yeah,
absolutely.
I'm sure.
Did you assemble your McDonald's toy Discourse? Sorry, John.
No, I was just going to say you got 4%, and my phone will likely overheat. So if I disappear, that's why. That is a beautiful, whatever that is.
Unfortunately, guys, it was a monopose kit. I opened it and it was like already pre-built and everything. These kits are getting worse and worse. Yeah, I was kind of expecting some hobbying tonight, but alas.
No, you should have got yourself a Kindred then, didn't you?
I know. Yeah, I really should have actually. I really should have. Sure. Well, I'll tell you what I have been painting though. I'll actually show you some models I have been painting. I've been painting some slaying. Some of the drones from the slaying. Yeah, from the game. I'm playing the drones. I have a friend who's playing Earth Tribes, and we're going to be playing some games this month for my. I do a review of board games as part of my Patreon.
Awesome.
Yep. I've got Slaying up there, waiting to be played.
Yeah, it seems very similar to the Judge Dredd game.
Not Slaying, Strontium Dog. Slaying is the boggly-eyed shape-changing dude.
You haven't played Strontium Dog yet, then?
No.
That's been discontinued. When did you get this game? Yeah, Strontium Dog is like done now. Like it came out, it released, had a lifespan, and then ended in the time that it took you to like get the box open.
Love you all. I have 30 seconds.
Pleasure, John.
Love you. Thank you for watching.
Bye-bye, Johnny B. Sausage Ambassador.
So
I'll stay on until it shuts off.
Okay. That's not entirely true, Discourse. So when in speaking to Warlord, they have a plan for things that don't that are not going to continuously sell well, that they'll bring them in and out of production.
Right. Okay.
It's the shelf space thing. Is like, how much product are people prepared to take from Warlord in their shops? It needs to move. So they're going to... So Storm Team Dog isn't dead. It isn't available, but they plan to release it again in the future.
Right. They haven't been particularly forthcoming about that, I think.
Because I don't think they plan to do it in the next couple of years.
You're right. Yeah. Okay. Which makes sense. Honestly, it's very niche.
It's niche. Yeah.
Like I would say that even Slaying is very niche. I had never heard of Slaying before the mini war game. But I obviously I'd heard of Judge Dredd though. The Judge Dredd game was the game that kind of got me into the system.
They're all 2000 AD.
Yeah, they are.
You need to be as old as me or more to remember 2000 AD. But
the Stallone movie, you had the Carl Urban movie. Judge Dredd has more cultural cachet. But it's as far as I'm aware, because I know that Judge Dredd and Slaying are the same, and I have to imagine the Scrutium Dog is too, that they are all the same core system of the, kind of like a skirmish version of bolt action almost.
And it's a lot like the zombie game.
Oh, really? Does the Project Z?
Project Z, yes.
Project Z. Yeah. So is that the same type of idea where you put the chits into the bag and things like that?
You put chits? I don't think you put chits in a bag. You might have done.
It's the Rick Priestley style of game design now. What could have been
the eye roll attack dice looking for certain symbols, and you roll the same dice looking for different symbols to determine.
Could have been Warhammer. It could have been Warhammer in an alternative world. They could, they could have been. You could be playing with your Space Marines and pulling activation dice out of a bag, and going, "My Terminators arrive now." Another, in a parallel dimension, in a different GURPS.
That would have been it. That would have been it. Well, who knows what Bolt Action 3rd Edition will bring?
Ooh, there's a Bolt Action 3rd Edition?
No, not yet. But there will be one day, right?
I don't know. Does Bolt Action need a 3rd edition?
No.
You don't think so? No. I think it kind of does, but that's only because Conflict 47. Actually, I think that Conflict 47 just needs a 2nd edition because it's still working off of a previous edition of Bolt Action. It's not. It's like an older version of Bolt Action rules. Is what Conflict 47 works from. And so it's very confusing when you're reading both the Bolt Action book and the Conflict 47 book, and they both disagree with one another. That gets very confusing very fast. I do feel like, though, there's a lot of little places, having played Bolt Action now, I do feel like there's a lot of little places where they could probably clean up the rules a little bit. I'd like to see them revisit melee as well. Revisit the kind of melee attacks.
You don't like the fact that if you lose, you're dead?
Yeah, I don't. I don't like that. I think I actually wouldn't mind it if it wasn't for the fact that the Japanese faction exists, because they really play heavily into that play style, and I think it leads to these kind of very weird, unfun moments. I like the idea of them being quite asymmetrical, though, and being very into these weird units. But I think in practice, it kind of works out. It makes me reluctant to play a Japanese army.
I think the problem with that is, I obviously have a great deal of affection for Rick Priestley. I think he's very poor at judging certain outcomes and the consequence of certain rules for something that isn't niche for that person. So what I mean is, if you're in a conventional war games club and you play Germans versus Americans all the time, with these figures, then occasionally you play a Japanese game, then you want the Japanese game to feel fun and to feel different, and the guy brings the figures that he's got. So you went away and created an army list for him to play it. Yeah. But I think Rick has been pretty bad at making a judgment. What happens when somebody plays every week? That's his army. And he really leans into these special rules, saying, and suddenly that wasn't a fun one-off game. That's an unbalanced faction. Yeah. If somebody wants to take one of these niche vehicles or niche army types that allow them to have 6 flamethrowers or something, what was it like? Well, when you throw 6, you blow up. Haha, this is fun. Suddenly, no, these are absolutely dominating this semi-competitive scene. The people who play this regularly have to lean into that. So the army rules are quite poorly balanced. It definitely could do with more errata in that, but I think you would have to wait for an edition change for it to see those things, I think. But those army rules, certainly the Japanese ones, they're terrible. Not only that they ignore that melee rule, which is terrible, making melee extremely dangerous for both sides, but they can get models that cost something like 3 points because they're just armed with a spear.
Yeah, the bamboo spear guys are kind of a bit,
right. So they never fought. The Japanese home defense plan issued hundreds of thousands of civilians with spears, but we never invaded Japan. But this is like Hitler's Volkssturm, right? This is the boys with a Panzerfaust behind a hedge thing. They're equivalent to that, but we didn't invade Japan. They never fought. This unit exists in an army list. A sensible player with a sense of history would never play that unit unless they were playing that scenario.
Yeah.
Right? It's the same reason you have a King Tiger on a table with 30 guys. Like, well, the mission is to kill the tiger then, isn't it? That's what this mission is.
I mean, the moment that you go to the table, though, it's an ahistorical game, right? Like you can, your alternative history is where the fun lies, and I think that the idea of like the bamboo spear guys and stuff have spears. I feel like a new edition could find the space then to kind of fix some of these little niggles.
Yes. I think the reason it's happened is they just feel these things were supposed to be niche, but ended up being really powerful. That they were supposed 100%. They made them available. Say, if you want to do this, they're here. Said, well, they're in the picking list. I'd look at the list and say, this looks like really good value.
The problem with the third edition, though, is that there's like 300 different campaign books for bolt action. So are they all going to be rendered like redundant? Because like a lot of them come with special armies and special units, and so like, where are they? Are they going to just re-release like the Battle for Stalingrad again and like all these different books and?
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I wouldn't want to see it. I wouldn't want to see the game change significantly. I wouldn't mind a 2.5 kind of thing where everything was the same except for these few things.
Yeah, I agree.
But rolling it onto a D8 system, make machine guns a bit better.
Would you? Yes, medium machine guns need to be a little bit. I like the suppression rules. There's the suppression fire mechanic, I think, that was suggested in an errata.
I would simply say that when any machine gun fires, it causes a pin. You don't need to hit anyone in my squad for everyone to hit the dirt.
Yeah, which would immediately give them a battlefield roll. Yeah, we immediately. To be honest, I fell in love with bolt action a little bit with Conflict 47, but bolt action, basically. I mean, I played Conflict 47, but I had nothing but historical units in it. In my force.
You didn't have any dodgy Tesla cannons.
No, I was up against some mechs, though. Some mechs. It's because it's so much cheaper and easier to buy into Conflict 47 by buying in through bolt action and buying some historical forces, But I've bought some vampires since then. I've bought some werewolves and things. Funnily enough, I'm not like a big fan of mechs, generally speaking.
Right.
But I dig
the BattleTech guy.
Yeah. Well, there's a reason I don't play BattleTech, which I probably actually thinking about doing a video on that soon. Because I keep getting people keep suggesting battle. I think I need to do a video just explaining why I don't play BattleTech at some stage.
Just that it's hideously complicated.
No, there's more to it. It's it's probably about 10 minutes runtime, I think, of reasons why.
Right. Okay. I've already been thinking about this.
Yeah.
Discourse, as ever, it has been a great pleasure to have you on. It's always good. I passionately believe there needs to be more debate, more discourse in this hobby. It's important that we interact with people that we don't 100% agree with. We had some very different views on Games Workshop models, and we don't see enough of that. I've always enjoyed your content because you say what you think about what you watch and what you see happening, and I appreciate that. I think there should be a lot more of it. Do you want to just remind the beautiful people at home where they can find you and so forth?
Sure, certainly. You can find me at Discourse Minis on YouTube, where I create wargaming content, or you can find me on Dungeons and Discourse, where I talk about role-playing game content. So check me out there if you want some high-strung, opinionated content and some good times as well, because it's not all doom and gloom.
Indeed, I think, yeah, you were the more upbeat about 10th edition than I was. All right, guys, It's been a real pleasure, as I say, over the next couple of weeks leading up to the launch and shortly after of the Flames of War German Berlin series. You're going to be seeing videos from us about that. They've sent us some stuff to preview, working on battle reports. Hopefully one I'm going to record with John tomorrow. I'll finish painting these Soviets. Wooly Mike is coming down over the weekend as well, and James on the Monday. I hope to get 3 very different games in that time. Should be good. A bit more product review of the other stuff, other releases that they've had for Berlin. Hope you'll enjoy that. And after that, you'll start seeing more of the routine content, SPQR. John finishes those miniatures, the Bolt Action campaign, etc. It's been a real pleasure. Be seeing you.